The sun was setting over Beverly Hills as Clint Eastwood stepped out of Bella Notte, his favorite Italian restaurant. The famous actor and director had just finished his dinner, a simple plate of spaghetti with a glass of red wine. At 94 years old, Eastwood still enjoyed these quiet moments alone. They were rare breaks from his busy life. The cool evening air felt good on his face. Eastwood stood tall despite his age, his eyes still sharp as they scanned the street. He had called for his car, and now he waited for the valet to bring it around. The restaurant behind him buzzed with the sounds of clinking glasses and soft conversation. People passed by on the sidewalk, some doing double takes when they recognized him. Eastwood was used to this. After 7 decades in Hollywood, being recognized was just part of daily life. Some people stopped and stared. Others pretended not to notice. A few brave souls approached for autographs, which he signed with a polite smile. Eastwood checked his watch. The valet was taking longer than usual. That's when he noticed her, a young girl sitting alone on a bench about 20 feet away. She seemed out of place, especially at this fancy restaurant. She was maybe 12 years old, with blonde hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a blue sweater that looked a size too big. Something about the girl caught Eastwood's attention. Perhaps it was the way she sat so still, or how she seemed to be watching him. She wasn't playing with a phone like most kids her age. Instead, she just sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on him. Eastwood frowned. Where were her parents? It was nearly 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, too late for a young girl to be alone in this part of town. His frown deepened as he considered what to do. Should he ask if she needed help? Call someone? Mind his own business? After a moment's thought, he decided he couldn't just leave her there. Eastwood walked over, his steps slow but steady. "Hello there," he said, his voice carrying that familiar gruff tone that had become his trademark in dozens of films. "Are you waiting for someone?" The girl looked up at him, her blue eyes wide. She didn't seem scared or excited. Instead, she looked almost relieved, as if she had been waiting for him to notice her. "You're Clint Eastwood," she said. It wasn't a question. "That's right," he replied, surprised by her calm. Most kids either didn't know who he was or got very excited when they recognized him from a movie their parents had shown them. This girl's reaction was different. "I'm Lily," she said, extending her small hand. "Lily Bennett." Eastwood shook her hand, noting how formal the gesture seemed for someone so young. "Nice to meet you, Lily. Are your parents inside?" he asked, nodding toward the restaurant. Lily shook her head. "No, sir. I came here alone." This answer worried Eastwood. A child her age shouldn't be wandering around Beverly Hills alone at night. "That's not safe, you know. Does anyone know you're here?" "My mom knows I'm out," Lily said carefully. "But she doesn't know I came to find you." Eastwood's eyebrows shot up. "To find me?" He looked around, half expecting to see cameras or someone watching them. Was this some kind of prank? A social media stunt? But the street was relatively quiet, and no one seemed to be paying special attention to them. "Yes, sir," Lily continued. "I've been waiting to meet you. I have something important to tell you about your past." Eastwood had heard many strange lines in his life, but this was certainly a first. A young girl claiming to have information about his past. He almost smiled at the absurdity of it, yet something in her serious expression gave him pause. "That's quite a statement, young lady," he said, deciding to sit down on the bench beside her. His car could wait. "What exactly do you think you know about my past?" Lily took a deep breath, as if preparing for a speech she had rehearsed many times. "I know you were in the Army at Fort Ord in the early 1950s before you became an actor. You worked as a swimming instructor there." Eastwood's interest grew. This wasn't common knowledge, especially not among 12-year-olds. "Go on," he said, his voice a little softer now. "While you were there, you met a woman named Grace Miller. She worked at the base's administration office. You two dated for a few months in 1951. Eastwood felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Grace Miller. a name he hadn't heard or thought about in decades. She had been a sweet, quiet woman with a wonderful laugh. Their time together had been brief but special. How could this child possibly know about Grace? "Who told you about Grace?" he asked, his voice now barely above a whisper. "She was my grandmother," Lily said simply. Eastwood stared at the girl, really looking at her for the first time. Those blue eyes. They did seem familiar somehow. But Grace had been engaged to another man when Eastwood had known her. They had ended things when he was transferred to another base. He had never seen or heard from her again. "Your grandmother?" he repeated, trying to make sense of this information. "Yes. She died last year. She was 93. Lily pulled a small photo from her pocket and handed it to Eastwood. "This is her." The photo showed an elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes sitting in a garden. Despite the years, Eastwood recognized her immediately. It was indeed Grace, though the last time he had seen her, she had been a young woman in her 20s with dark hair and that same bright smile. "Right. I'm sorry for your loss," Eastwood said automatically, handing the photo back. "But I don't understand why you're here telling me this." Lily took another deep breath. "After Grandma Grace died, my mom found a box of old letters and photos in her attic, things she had kept hidden all her life." A car honked nearby, and Eastwood realized it was his driver, still waiting. He waved the man off, indicating he needed more time. Then he turned back to Lily. "What kind of things?" he asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. "Photos of you and her together. Letters she wrote to you but never sent." And Lily paused, looking directly into Eastwood's eyes. "A birth certificate." Eastwood felt his heart skip a beat. "A birth certificate?" he repeated slowly. Lily nodded. "For my mother, Susan Bennett. She was born in December 1951, 8 months after you were transferred from Fort Ord." The world seemed to slow down around Eastwood. The sounds of the street faded away. His mind raced back through time, calculating dates, remembering his last days with Grace. It was possible. It was definitely possible. "Grace never told you," Lily continued. "She was already engaged to my grandfather, John Bennett, when she found out she was pregnant. He agreed to raise the baby as his own, and they moved to Sacramento. No one ever knew the truth except them. And now you," Eastwood said quietly. "And my mom. And now you." Lily reached into her backpack and pulled out a small envelope. "I brought some of the photos for you to see, and a letter Grandma Grace wrote to you just before she died. She wanted you to have it, but she never had the courage to send it." Eastwood's hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. Inside were several old black and white photos. The first showed him and Grace on the beach in Monterey, both young and smiling. He remembered that day clearly, even after all these years. The second photo showed Grace holding a baby that could have been his daughter. "This is a lot to take in," Eastwood said, his voice rough with emotion. "How did you find me?" "It wasn't hard," Lily said with a small smile. "You eat here every Tuesday. I read that in a magazine." Despite the shock, Eastwood had to smile at her determination. "Smart girl." "Mr. Eastwood," Lily said, suddenly sounding very much like the child she was. "Does this mean you're my grandfather?" Eastwood looked at the photos again, then at Lily's hopeful face, those eyes. He could see Grace in them, but now he wondered if he could see himself too. "I don't know yet," he answered honestly, "but I think we need to find out." The valet approached again, looking concerned. "Sir, your car has been waiting for 15 minutes, Eastwood nodded. "Thank you." He turned back to Lily. "Where's your mother now? Does she know you're here?" Lily looked down at her sneakers. "She's at our hotel. We're staying at the Beverly Garden Hotel. She thinks I'm at the pool. She'd be really mad if she knew I came here alone." "I'm sure she would be," Eastwood agreed. "It's not safe for you to be out alone like this. How about I give you a ride back to your hotel and we can talk to your mother together?" Lily's face brightened. "Really? You'll come meet her?" "Yes," Eastwood said, making his decision. I think I need to meet Susan Bennett. But you have to. Promise never to wander off alone like this again. It's dangerous. I promise, Lily said solemnly. As they walked to his waiting car, Eastwood felt as if his life had just taken an unexpected turn. At 94, he thought he had experienced everything life could offer. But now, this young girl had appeared with a story that could change everything. Was it possible he had a daughter he never knew about? A whole branch of his family he had never met? The shock of this possibility left him feeling both stunned and curious. Whatever happened next, Clint Eastwood knew his life would never be the same. Clint Eastwood's black car pulled up to the Beverly Garden Hotel. The ride from the restaurant had been mostly quiet. Lily sat in the back seat next to Eastwood, occasionally stealing glances at the famous actor who might be her grandfather. Eastwood held the envelope of photos in his hands, looking at them again and again as the city lights flashed by the windows. My mom doesn't know I came to find you, Lily said as they entered the hotel lobby. She might be upset. Eastwood nodded. That's understandable. Finding out like this is a shock for everyone. He tried to keep his voice calm, but inside his mind was racing. Could he really have a daughter he never knew about? A grandchild? The lobby was quiet, with just a few guests sitting in the comfortable chairs or passing through. A few people recognized Eastwood, their eyes widening as they saw the legendary actor walking through the hotel with a young girl. But most were polite enough not to approach. We're in room 312, Lily said, leading the way to the elevators. As they rode up to the third floor, Eastwood asked, Does your mother look like Grace? Lily thought for a moment. A little. She has the same smile, but people always said she has your eyes. She looked up at him. I think I might have them too. Eastwood studied her face. There was something familiar there, but he couldn't be sure if it was his imagination or reality. The elevator doors opened and they walked down the hallway. Lily stopped in front of room 312 and took a deep breath. Ready? She asked. Eastwood almost smiled at the irony. This young girl was asking if he was ready, when she had been the one brave enough to seek him out in the first place. Ready, he confirmed. Lily used her keycard to open the door. Mom, she called out as they entered. I'm back from the pool. The hotel room was a simple suite with a small living area connected to a bedroom. A woman emerged from the bedroom, her hair wet from a shower, wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. Lily, I was just about to come look for you. It's getting late and... Susan Bennett stopped mid-sentence when she saw who was standing beside her daughter. Her face went pale. Oh my God. Mom, I can explain. Lily started quickly. Susan Bennett was about 70 years old with shoulder-length gray hair and a slender build. And Eastwood could see it immediately. She had his eyes. The same shape, the same intensity. It was like looking at a female version of himself, aged and softened by time. What have you done, Lily? Susan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She stared at Eastwood, unable to look away. I'm sorry for the surprise, Eastwood said, stepping forward. Your daughter found me at a restaurant. She showed me some photos and told me about Grace. Susan sat down heavily on the couch. I can't believe this is happening, she said. Lily, we agreed we would think about this more before making any decisions. I know, Mom, Lily said, sitting next to her mother. But I was afraid we would leave Los Angeles without meeting him, and I just wanted to know. Susan put her arm around her daughter. I understand, but this wasn't the right way. She looked up at Eastwood, who still stood by the door. Please, sit down, Mr. Eastwood. I guess we have a lot to talk about. Eastwood took a seat in the chair across from them. The envelope of photos sat on his lap. Your daughter tells me you found some letters and photos after Grace passed away, he said gently. Susan nodded. It was a complete shock. I was 69 years old when I found out John Bennett wasn't my biological father. She shook her head in disbelief. All my life I never knew. My mother kept that secret for almost 70 years. Did John know? Eastwood asked. Yes, Susan said. According to the letters, he knew from the beginning. He and my mother were already engaged when she found out she was pregnant. He loved her enough to accept the situation. They got married quickly and no one ever questioned it. Eastwood nodded slowly. John sounds like a good man. He was, Susan agreed. He died 10 years ago, but he was the best father anyone could ask for. He never once made me feel like I wasn't his. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Eastwood said, I knew your mother briefly in 1951. We spent time together for a few months before I was transferred to another base. She never told me she was pregnant. According to her letters she found out after you were gone, Susan explained. She wrote to you many times but never sent the letters. She was afraid of what might happen. You were just starting your career and she didn't want to complicate things for you. I would have wanted to know, Eastwood said quietly. Susan gave a sad smile. Maybe. But things were different back then, and she made her choice. She wrote that she never regretted it. Lily, who had been quiet during this exchange, suddenly asked, Can I get anyone something to drink? Water? The hotel has a coffee maker. Eastwood smiled at her attempt to play hostess. Water would be fine, thank you. As Lily went to get water for everyone, Susan continued. When I found the box of letters and photos, I was in shock. My whole identity changed overnight. I wasn't who I thought I was. Part of me was angry at my mother for keeping such a big secret, but part of me understood. And how do you feel now? Eastwood asked. Susan took a deep breath. Honestly, I don't know. We came to Los Angeles because I wanted to see the city where you live. I thought maybe I would get up the courage to contact you, but I wasn't ready yet. She looked toward her daughter. Lily was more determined. Lily returned with 3 glasses of water and set them on the coffee table. I just thought everyone had the right to know, she said. Eastwood took a sip of water. I appreciate that, Lily, but your mother is right. This is complicated for all of us. Susan reached for the envelope on Eastwood's lap. May I? She asked. He handed it to her. Of course. Susan opened it and spread out the photos. These are copies. I have the originals at home. She pointed to one of the pictures showing Grace and Eastwood on the beach. This was taken in Monterey, right? Eastwood nodded. Yes, we spent a day there in the spring of 1951. Looking at the photo brought back memories. Grace's laugh, the way she had splashed water at him, the picnic they had shared on the sand. And this, Susan said, pointing to another photo, is me when I was about 6 months old. The black and white image showed Grace holding a baby. On the back, my mother wrote Susan, Clint's daughter, and the date. Eastwood looked at the photo closely. The baby had dark hair and was smiling at the camera. He tried to see himself in that tiny face, but it was difficult to tell. I know this must be hard to believe, Susan said. And if you want proof, I understand. We can do a DNA test. Eastwood looked from the photo to Susan's face. The resemblance was there. Those eyes, the shape of the jaw. But a DNA test would remove all doubt. I think that would be a good idea, he said. Not because I don't believe you, but because we should all be certain. I agree, Susan said. She hesitated, then added, I want you to know I'm not after anything from you. I have a good life. I was a teacher for 40 years before I retired. I have Lily and 2 grown sons who live in Oregon. I'm not looking for money or fame. I never thought you were, Eastwood said sincerely. He could see the honesty in her eyes, his eyes. Lily, who had been quiet, suddenly asked, If the test shows you're really my grandfather, what happens then? It was a good question. Eastwood was 94 years old. He had lived a full life, with several children from different relationships. What would it mean to add another daughter and grandchildren to his family at this stage of his life? I don't know exactly, Eastwood answered honestly. But I'd like to get to know you both, if that's what you want too. Susan reached over and took his hand. It was the first physical contact between them, and both seemed surprised by the gesture. One step at a time, she said. We've all had a big shock today. Eastwood nodded. One step at a time, He agreed. They talked for another hour, sharing simple details about their lives. Susan told him about her career as a math teacher, her marriage to Lily's grandfather, Peter, who had died 5 years ago, and her life in Sacramento. Eastwood told them about his current projects, his home in Carmel, and some stories about his early days in Hollywood. As the evening grew late, Eastwood stood to leave. "I'll have my assistant arrange for the DNA test tomorrow if that works for you." "We're here for 3 more days," Susan said. "That should be enough time." At the door, Lily suddenly gave Eastwood a hug. It caught him by surprise, but he hugged her back gently. "Thank you for not being mad at me for finding you," she said. "I'm glad you did," Eastwood replied, and he meant it. As he rode down in the elevator alone, Eastwood felt as if his world had shifted. After 9 decades of life, he thought he knew his own story. But now there was a new chapter unfolding, one he never expected. Whether the DNA test proved Susan was his daughter or not, meeting her and Lily had already changed him. He stepped out into the night, wondering what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Eastwood sent his personal doctor to the Beverly Garden Hotel. The doctor brought everything needed for the DNA test. It was a simple process. Just a quick swab inside the cheek from both Eastwood and Susan. The samples would be rushed to a private lab with results promised in 24 hours. "Normally these tests take longer," the doctor explained as he packed up his kit. "But Mr. Eastwood has asked for this to be a priority." Susan nodded, still looking a bit overwhelmed by it all. Lily sat nearby, watching everything with great interest. "What will you do while we wait for the results?" Eastwood asked. He had stayed for the test and now stood by the window of their hotel room, hands in his pockets. "We had planned to see some sights," Susan said. "The Hollywood sign, Venice Beach, the usual tourist things." "I could show you around," Eastwood offered, surprising himself with the suggestion. "If you'd like." Susan looked uncertain, but Lily jumped up from her seat. "Yes, please, that would be amazing." Susan gave her daughter a look that said, "Calm down," but she smiled. "That's very kind of you, but we don't want to impose on your time." "I don't mind," Eastwood said. "I don't have any meetings today, and it's been a while since I played tourist in my own city." An hour later, they were in Eastwood's car driving through Los Angeles. His regular driver, Carlos, was at the wheel, while Eastwood sat in the back, with Susan and Lily. They went first to the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Eastwood showed them his star on the sidewalk, and people watched in amazement as the real Clint Eastwood stood by his own star. Many took pictures from a distance, but no one approached them directly. Something about Eastwood's presence kept them at bay. "This is so cool," Lily said, taking photos with her phone. "None of my friends will believe this. Maybe we should keep this between us for now," Susan suggested gently, "at least until we know for sure." Lily nodded, understanding the need for privacy. They visited other famous spots around Hollywood, then drove up to Griffith Observatory for a view of the city. As they stood looking out over Los Angeles, Eastwood found himself telling stories about his early days in the city when he was just a struggling actor trying to make it. "I had no idea I would ever become famous," he told them. "I was just trying to pay the rent." "Mom says the same thing about teaching," Lily said. "She didn't plan to be a math teacher. It just happened." Susan laughed. "That's not quite how it happened, but yes, life takes unexpected turns." Eastwood looked at her. "What did you want to be originally?" "A writer," Susan admitted. "I loved books and wanted to write novels. But then I got married young, had my sons, and needed a stable job. Teaching math was something I was good at, and it had regular hours." "Do you regret it?" Eastwood asked. Susan shook her head. "No, I loved teaching, and I still write sometimes, just for myself." As they walked back to the car, Eastwood realized he was enjoying their company. There was something refreshing about Susan's straightforward manner. She wasn't impressed by his fame or trying to get anything from him. And Lily reminded him of his younger self, curious and determined. They had lunch at a quiet restaurant in Malibu with a view of the ocean. The restaurant owner, an old friend of Eastwood's, gave them a private table away from other diners. Tell me about your sons, Eastwood said as they ate. Susan smiled. Jack is 45. He's a doctor in Portland. Kevin is 42 and teaches history at a community college in Eugene. They're both married, and Jack has 2 children, a boy and a girl. So I might have 2 grandsons, and 2 more great-grandchildren, Eastwood mused. And I might have 2 uncles. I never met, Lily added. The possibility hung in the air between them. Tomorrow they would know for sure. After lunch they drove north along the coast. The day was clear, and the ocean sparkled in the sunlight. They stopped at a small secluded beach that Eastwood knew about. I used to come here to think when I was working on difficult projects, he told them as they walked along the sand. Something about the sound of the waves helps clear my mind. Susan walked ahead with Carlos, asking him questions about his many years working for Eastwood. This left Eastwood alone with Lily for a few minutes. Are you nervous about the test results? Lily asked him directly. Eastwood considered the question. Yes, he admitted, but not for the reasons you might think. I'm not worried about having another daughter. I'm worried about all the years I missed. Lily nodded, seeming to understand, despite her young age. Mom worries about that too. She said it's strange to find your father when you're already a grandmother yourself. Life is full of strange turns, Eastwood said. Sometimes the most unexpected ones bring the greatest joy. They rejoined Susan and Carlos, and soon it was time to head back to the city. The day had passed quickly, filled with sightseeing and conversation. As they arrived back at the hotel, there was a new ease between them, even though the big questions still remained unanswered. Thank you for today, Susan said as they stood in the hotel lobby. It was special. It was, Eastwood agreed. I'll call you tomorrow when I get the results. That night, back at his home, Eastwood sat alone in his study. On his desk were photos of his known children and grandchildren. He had always tried to be a good father, though his busy career had often made that difficult. Now, at 94, he might have another chance at family. A daughter he never knew, grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. He picked up the photo of Grace holding baby Susan. If this was indeed his daughter, how would his other children react? What would the press say? These questions seemed small compared to the bigger one. What kind of relationship could he build with Susan and her family in the time he had left? Eastwood was not a man who usually dwelled on regrets. He had always looked forward, not back. But tonight, he couldn't help thinking about what might have been if Grace had told him about the pregnancy. Would he have married her? Would they have made a life together? Would he have watched Susan grow up, seen her first steps, helped her, with homework, walked her down the aisle? These thoughts kept him awake long into the night. The next morning, Eastwood's phone rang early. It was his doctor. We have the results, Clint, he said. Do you want me to tell you over the phone, or would you prefer I come over? Just tell me, Eastwood said, his heart beating faster despite his usual calm demeanor. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then the doctor said, The test is positive. The DNA match confirms that Susan Bennett is your biological daughter. There's no doubt about it. Eastwood sat down slowly in his chair, even though he had suspected it from the moment he saw Susan's eyes. Hearing the confirmation still hit him hard. Thank you, he said to the doctor. Please send me the full report. After hanging up, Eastwood sat quietly for several minutes, letting the news sink in. Then he picked up his phone again and dialed Susan's hotel room. Hello? Her voice sounded tense, expectant. Susan, Eastwood said, his own voice rough with emotion. I just got the call from the lab. And? The word carried all her hope and fear. It's positive, Eastwood said simply. You are my daughter. The line went silent. Then he heard a soft sob. I knew it, Susan said finally. Somehow I've always known something was different about me. I just never imagined this. Would you and Lily like to come to my house today? Eastwood asked. I think we have a lot more to talk about. Yes, Susan agreed. We'd like that very much. As Eastwood hung up the phone, he felt a strange mixture of emotions. sadness for the lost years, joy at the discovery, anxiety about the future. But most of all, he felt a sense of wonder. After all this time, life could still surprise him. At 94 years old, Clint Eastwood had just discovered he was a father again, and somehow that felt like the beginning of a new chapter, not the end of his story. Carlos drove Susan and Lily to Eastwood's home in Carmel later that day. The drive was long but beautiful. They left Los Angeles behind and headed north along the coast. Susan was quiet for much of the journey, lost in her thoughts. Lily watched, the ocean through the window, taking pictures now and then. "Are you okay, Mom?" Lily asked after a long silence. Susan smiled and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Yes, just thinking. It's a lot to process." "Are you happy that Clint Eastwood is your dad?" Lily asked. Susan thought about this. "I'm not sure happy is the right word. I'm curious, confused, interested. It's like finding a missing piece of a puzzle I didn't know was incomplete." When they finally arrived at Eastwood's estate, the sun was beginning to set. The property was beautiful, but not flashy. A large rustic house sat on several acres of land with a view of the Pacific Ocean. It looked peaceful and private. Carlos carried their bags to the guest house, a smaller building near the main house. Eastwood was waiting for them on the porch of the main house. He looked different here, more relaxed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. "Welcome," he said as they approached. "I hope the drive wasn't too tiring." "It was fine," Susan assured him. "Your home is beautiful." "Thank you. I've lived here for many years. It's my favorite place to be." Eastwood led them inside to a comfortable living room with large windows overlooking the ocean. "Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Something stronger?" "Coffee would be nice," Susan said. "Can I have hot chocolate?" Lily asked. Eastwood smiled. "Of course, make yourselves comfortable. I'll be right back." As he went to the kitchen, Susan and Lily looked around the room. There were photos everywhere. Eastwood with various celebrities on movie sets and with his family. Susan studied them closely, looking at the faces of people who were, technically, her half-siblings. Eastwood returned with a tray of drinks. They sat down, and for a moment no one seemed to know what to say. Finally, Eastwood broke the silence. "I called my attorney this morning. I'd like to update my will to include you, Susan, and your children and grandchildren." Susan looked startled. "That's not necessary. I didn't come here for money." "I know that," Eastwood said, "but you're my daughter. You deserve to be recognized as part of my family." Susan took a sip of her coffee, then set the cup down carefully. "This is all happening so fast." "I'm 94 years old," Eastwood said simply. "I don't have the luxury of taking things slowly anymore." This made Susan smile despite herself. "Fair point. Have you told your other children about me?" Susan asked. Eastwood shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted to meet you first, to be sure. And I wanted to talk to you about how to handle this. Going public will mean media attention. Lots of it." Susan hadn't thought about that aspect. Her quiet life as a retired math teacher in Sacramento would change once people knew she was Clint Eastwood's daughter. "We should call my sons," Susan said. "They should hear this from me before anyone else." Eastwood nodded. "Of course. You can use my office for privacy." Lily, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly asked, "Do I get to call you Grandpa?" Both Susan and Eastwood looked at her in surprise. Then Eastwood smiled. "I'd like that very much, Lily." Susan made the calls to her sons from Eastwood's office. Both were shocked by the news. Jack, the doctor, asked a lot of questions about the DNA test. Kevin, the history teacher, was quieter, processing the information. "I'd like you both to meet him," Susan told them. "Can you come to Carmel this weekend?" Both agreed, curious to meet their newfound grandfather. When Susan returned to the living room, she found Eastwood showing Lily some of his awards. A small Oscar statue sat on a shelf, somewhat hidden behind books. "Most people keep those front and center," Susan commented. Eastwood shrugged. "They're just things. The work was what mattered, not the awards." They had dinner on the patio, watching the last light fade from the sky as they ate. Eastwood's housekeeper had prepared a simple but delicious meal. The conversation flowed more easily now, moving from Eastwood's films to Susan's teaching career to Lily's school activities. "My sons will be here this weekend," Susan told Eastwood. "They're curious to meet you." "I'm looking forward to it," Eastwood said. He seemed genuinely pleased. "Do they have families?" "Jack is married to Diane. They have 2 children. Emma is 15 and Ben is 12. Kevin is married to Paul." If Eastwood was surprised by the mention of Kevin's husband, he didn't show it. "Tell me about them," he said. Susan spent the next hour talking about her sons, her voice full of pride. Eastwood listened attentively, asking questions, building a picture of the family he never knew he had. Later, as Susan and Lily prepared to go to the guest house for the night, Eastwood showed them one more thing. In his study, he opened a drawer and took out a small box. "I found this today," he said, opening the box to reveal an old compass. "I carried this with me during my time in the Army. I had it with me when I knew Grace. I'd like you to have it, Susan." Susan took the compass carefully. It was simple but well made, with a slight dent on one side. "Thank you," she said, touched by the gesture. The next few days fell into a pleasant routine. In the mornings, they would have breakfast together. Then Eastwood would show them around the property or take them to his favorite spots in Carmel. In the afternoons, Susan would often read on the patio while Lily explored the grounds, or Eastwood worked in his office. One evening, Eastwood showed them some of his old films. Lily had never seen them before, and she watched with wide eyes as a much younger version of Eastwood appeared on the screen. "You were handsome," she said, making both adults laugh. "Were?" Eastwood asked with mock offense. "Still are," Susan assured him, and there was a moment of connection between them that felt truly like father and daughter. By Thursday, reporters had somehow gotten wind of the story. A few cars were parked at the end of Eastwood's driveway, and his phone rang constantly with calls from journalists seeking confirmation. "It was bound to happen," Eastwood said as he drew the curtains against the long lens cameras. "My attorney can issue a statement, or we can just say no comment." "What do you think is best?" Susan asked. Eastwood considered this. "A simple statement confirming that DNA tests have identified you as my biological daughter. Nothing more. The less we say, the less they have to speculate about." Susan agreed, and the statement was released that afternoon. By evening, the story was on every entertainment news site and several major news outlets. "Clint Eastwood discovers long-lost daughter at 94, Lily read from her phone. "They make it sound like a movie." "In a way, it is," Eastwood said. "But we get to decide how this story ends." That night, Susan couldn't sleep. She went outside to the patio of the guest house and sat looking at the stars. After a while, she heard footsteps and turned to see Eastwood approaching. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Susan shook her head. "Too much. On my mind." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the sound of the waves. "I keep thinking about my mother," Susan said finally. "About why she never told me. Or you." "Different times," Eastwood said. "She was protecting everyone. You, herself, me, her husband." "I wish I could talk to her about it," Susan said. "There are so many questions I'll never get to ask." Eastwood nodded. "I understand. I wish I could have seen her again to thank her for raising you so well." Susan smiled at the compliment. She would have liked to hear that. Another silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was a sense of peace in sitting together, father and daughter, under the stars. "What happens now?" Susan asked eventually. Eastwood looked at her. "Whatever we want. We can't get back the years we lost, but we can make the most of the time we have now." Susan nodded. It was a good answer. Simple and true, like the man himself. As they sat together in the quiet night, Susan felt something settle within her. Her life had taken an unexpected turn, but maybe this new path would lead to places she never imagined. And maybe, just maybe, It wasn't too late for her to know her father after all. The weekend arrived, bringing with it Susan's sons and their families. Jack came with his wife Diane and their 2 children, Emma and Ben. Kevin arrived with his husband Paul. They all looked nervous as they drove up to Eastwood's home, unsure of what to expect. Eastwood was waiting for them on the porch with Susan and Lily beside him. The moment had a strange feeling, like 2 separate worlds finally meeting after existing in parallel for decades. "Welcome," Eastwood said, stepping forward to greet them. "I'm very glad you could come." Jack, who looked a lot like Susan, shook Eastwood's hand firmly. "This is quite something," he said. "When Mom called, I thought she was joking at first." "I had the same reaction," Eastwood admitted with a smile. "It's not every day you discover a new family at my age." Kevin, who was quieter than his brother, studied Eastwood's face carefully. "I can see it," he said finally. "The eyes. Mom has your eyes." The ice was broken, and they all went inside. The children, Emma and Ben, were shy at first, but soon warmed up to their new great-grandfather. Emma, at 15, was more aware of who Eastwood was and asked questions about his movies. Ben, at 12, was more interested in exploring the property and wanted to know if Eastwood had any horses. "Not anymore," Eastwood told him, "but there's a stable nearby where we can go riding tomorrow if you'd like." Ben's face lit up at the suggestion. The day passed with introductions, stories, and getting to know each other. Eastwood's housekeeper prepared a big lunch, which they ate on the patio. There were awkward moments, as would be expected, but also moments of genuine connection and laughter. In the afternoon, while the others were playing a board game, Jack took Eastwood aside for a private conversation. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for how you've handled this. My mother seems happy." Eastwood nodded. "She's an impressive woman. You all are a credit to her." "She was a wonderful mother," Jack said. "Always supportive, always there for us. I want you to know that even though you weren't in her life, she didn't miss out on love. My father, John Bennett, he loved her very much." "I'm glad," Eastwood said sincerely. "She deserved that." Later, Kevin showed Eastwood some family photos he had brought. There were pictures of Susan as a young woman, of her wedding to Peter, of the boys growing up. Eastwood looked at each one carefully, trying to fill in the blank spaces of his knowledge, to understand the life his daughter had lived without him. "She was always different from other mothers," Kevin said as they looked through the albums. "More independent, more willing to let us find our own way. I see that in you too." Eastwood smiled at the observation. "Nature versus nurture," he mused. "Some things get passed down in the blood, I suppose." That evening they had a big family dinner. Eastwood had invited his daughter Francesca, who lived nearby, to join them. She arrived with some hesitation, but was gracious and welcoming to Susan and her family. "This is strange for all of us," Francesca said to Susan as they helped set the table. "But I'm glad to meet you. Dad seems, I don't know, more alive since you came into his life." Susan was touched by the comment. "Thank you for being so kind about it. I know this must be a shock for you and your siblings." Francesca shrugged. "Dad has always had a complicated life. This is just one more surprise, but a good one, I think." The dinner was lively, with multiple conversations happening at once. Eastwood sat at the head of the table, looking around at the faces of his new and old family members mingling together. For a man who had seen and done so much in his long life, this was perhaps one of the most extraordinary moments. A family dinner with a daughter he hadn't known existed until a week ago, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren he was just meeting. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Ben asked if they could watch one of Eastwood's old Western movies, and the actor agreed with a laugh. As the familiar music of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly filled the room, 3 generations of Eastwood's family, both known and newly discovered, watched together. The next day, Eastwood took Ben riding as promised. Susan, Jack, and Kevin came along. The stable was just a few miles from Eastwood's home, and the owner was an old friend who greeted Eastwood warmly. "Been a while since you've been riding, Clint," the man said. "Too long," Eastwood agreed, as he helped Ben onto a gentle bay horse. They rode along trails with beautiful views of the coast. Eastwood may have been 94, but he sat straight in the saddle, looking very much like the cowboys he had played on screen. Ben was thrilled, telling everyone it was the best day ever. As they rode, Susan moved her horse alongside Eastwood's. "Thank you for this," she said, "for all of it." Eastwood looked at her, his daughter's face now becoming familiar to him. "No need for thanks. This is how it should be." That night, as the weekend visit came to an end, they all gathered on Eastwood's patio. The stars were bright overhead, and the sound of the ocean provided a gentle backdrop to their conversation. "So what happens now?" Jack asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Eastwood looked at Susan, letting her take the lead. "We stay in touch," she said simply. "We're family now, strange as that may seem. We'll visit when we can. Call often." "I'd like that," Eastwood said. "And I'd like to come to Sacramento sometime to see where you live, Susan." "You'd be welcome any time," she told him. The next morning, as they prepared to leave, there was a feeling of both ending and beginning. The initial shock and novelty were wearing off, replaced by something more real and lasting. Eastwood gave each of them a hug goodbye. When he came to Lily, she held on a little longer. "Thank you for finding me at that restaurant," he whispered to her. Lily smiled up at him. "I just had a feeling it was the right thing to do." As they drove away, Eastwood stood on his porch watching until the car was out of sight. Inside, his house felt emptier now, but his life felt fuller. 3 months later, Eastwood attended Emma's high school play in Sacramento. He sat quietly in the back of the auditorium, just another proud grandfather watching his great-granddaughter perform. A few people recognized him, but most respected his privacy. After the show, he joined Susan and the rest of the family for dinner at a local restaurant. They had a corner table, away from curious eyes. Eastwood looked around at these people who were his blood, his family, who had been unknown to him for so long. "Emma was wonderful tonight," he said, raising his glass in a toast to the teenager, who blushed with pleasure. "She gets her dramatic talent from you, obviously," Susan said with a smile. Later that night, as Eastwood prepared to return to his hotel, Susan walked him out to his car. "Are you happy with how things have turned out?" she asked him. Eastwood thought about the question. "Yes," he said finally. "I miss so much of your life, and that can't be changed. But I'm grateful for now, for knowing you and your family." Susan nodded. "I feel the same way." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, father and daughter still learning about each other but no longer strangers. "You know," Eastwood said, "when Lily first approached me outside that restaurant, I thought it was just another strange encounter with a fan. I never imagined it would change my life." "She's always been determined," Susan said with a fond smile. "Once she gets an idea in her head, there's no stopping her." "Sounds like someone else I know," Eastwood said, giving Susan a meaningful look. They both laughed, recognizing the shared trait. As Eastwood drove away, he thought about the strange turns life could take. At 94, he had thought his story was mostly written, the important chapters already completed. But now there was this unexpected new section, filled with new characters and new emotions. The truth was, life never stopped surprising you if you stayed open to its possibilities. And even at 94, Clint Eastwood was still open to whatever might come next. A week later, he started writing letters to Susan, real handwritten letters on paper. He wanted her to have something to keep, something to pass down, something that told the story of how a chance meeting outside a restaurant had brought a father and daughter together after nearly 7 decades apart. And that, Eastwood thought, as he signed his name at the bottom of the first letter, was a story worth telling.